Live right here on the early line. It is a Tuesday, which now means we are just 48 hours from game day once again in the college football playoff. On a Thursday night in South Florida, it is the Orange Bowl between the 6th seed Penn State and the 7th seed Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinal, the first of our two matchups that will decide a national championship game, now just 13 days away, 2 weeks from last night. We look at the numbers here on the early line and what we can expect for Thursday night in Miami at the Orange Bowl. Where it stands right now between the Irish and the Nittany Lions is a market that is working to Notre Dame. This basically opened at a pick'em, which is basically where Notre Dame's last matchup in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia closed. It is now 2.5 points in favor of the Irish, minus 137 on the money line. A total that opened at 46.5 has actually dropped by a full point to 45 and a hook. A defensive struggle, a low-scoring affair expected in Miami. So, Joe, as we look at this number and we see Notre Dame laying just 2.5 points, how close and competitive do you anticipate the Orange Bowl is going to be?
Well, it's certainly the market thinks it's going to be competitive, and it should be because I think these are two of the best defenses in the country going toe-to-toe with one another. I do believe Penn State has had the easiest path to get to this point as they won and covered, Ben, as really big favorites in both games. SMU, couple of pick sixes, 38-10. Then, of course, they did the same thing with Boise State. They ended up getting a late score there for those that laid that number with them. So, listen, it's been, I'd rather be lucky than good sometimes, and Penn State got the luck of the draw there. But they also let Boise State hang around in that game for much longer than they should have. Drew Aller only had 13 completions. They were outgained in that game. So if you play like that against Notre Dame, that's not going to turn out all that well. But this is another one, Ben, when I agree with the original market movement. This opened up 46.5, 47. It's been bet down to 45, 45.5, and I agree with it. Jeremiah Love still banged up, 6 carries, 19 yards here. I do not see Notre Dame or Penn State, for that matter, having all sorts of monster games offensively against these two defenses. I think both coaches are going to want to establish the run, and the one who can win in the trenches is going to win the game. Ultimately, though, I think we don't even sniff 45 points in this game, Ben. I think it's a dead under between these two teams.
Could it look very similar to what we saw in the Sugar Bowl between the Fighting Irish and the Bulldogs? Very likely. That's what the odds are expecting right now. Penn State has scored 31-plus points in each of its 2 college football playoff games, 31 against Boise, 38, of course, in their matchup against SMU. Part of that, though, 2 pick sixes in the opening half. Penn State in those first 2 games, Joe, you mentioned the path. I bet the Nittany Lions at a minus 172, rather juicy, chalky number to get to the semifinal. But it still made sense to me because it was better than a moneyline parlay would have been for the Nittany Lions as an 8.5-point favorite against the Mustangs and an 11.5-point favorite against the Broncos. Why? Penn State as a favorite, as good as you will find in college football. Since the start of the 2022 college football season, 5 FBS programs have won double-digit games each and every season. Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and actually Ohio. Shout out to Bobcats and what Tim Albin had done there with the Bobcats team. Now I believe the head coach at Charlotte. Regardless of those programs, Joe, to win double-digit games since 2022, you have to obviously beat the teams you are expected to. In Penn State, since the start of 2022, as a favorite in 35 of 41 total games, elite. 34-1 straight up, 25-9-1 against the spread. Both the best win and cover percentage as a favorite among power conference programs. But what about the other 6 games? Booked as a dog. Now that's where things get dicey for James Franklin and company. It's only a 2.5-point spread. When it first opened, it was basically a pick'em. but Penn State is still not expected to win outright. And when they have been booked as an underdog in the last 3 years, they are 0-6 straight up and 1-5 against the spread, covering as a 15.5-point underdog the only time against the Buckeyes in 2022, but still lost that game by double digits. So, Joe, for me, until I see that change, it's rather simple. I believe in this Notre Dame team. I have a Fighting Irish ticket to win a national championship. I bet Notre Dame on the money line as soon as this line opened up around a minus 115 number.
Yeah, well, listen, if that's the case, you're going to bet them to win this game. You might as well bet them to win it all, too, while you still can at, 3-1, Ben, somewhere along those lines. I would go all in. If I'm on Notre Dame, I'm going all in here. I do think this is a great live betting game as well, because I do think you're going to be able to get probably a better number on Notre Dame or Penn State if this game unfolds the way I think it will. But to me, the total is what happens when it's 0-0 going into the second quarter, or 3-0, Ben, with about 7 minutes to play. Where is that total going to be? It's going to be in the mid-30s here, and I think a middling opportunity certainly will present itself here.
All 4 games for either of these two teams, Marcus Freeman's Irish, James Franklin's Nittany Lions, have stayed under so far in the college football playoff. Penn State in both against SMU and Boise State, and of course for Notre Dame in their 2 matchups against Indiana and Georgia. Key matchup for me, Joe, in terms of the actual X's and O's, the two-headed monster in the backfield for Penn State. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, who both have been elite really since the end of the Big Ten championship game against a Notre Dame rush defense that allowed 66 yards to Georgia, 63 yards against Indiana. That will turn the tide in this game. If the Nittany Lions can be prolific like they have been in their last 3, it might start to favor Penn State. Just not sure it happens against Al Golden's Notre Dame defense. The Cotton Bowl on a Friday night. Next. We are just 2 days away from our doubleheader in the college football playoff semifinal. First game on Thursday in the Orange Bowl between Notre Dame and Penn State. Our next game, our final CFP semi on a Friday night in the heart of Texas. Dallas, the site of the Cotton Bowl, not the actual Cotton Bowl stadium, but that being AT&T Stadium, Jerry World, of course, the home of the Cowboys. For the in-state team in Texas, taking on the national championship favorites, entering the Final Four, that would be Ohio State. The Buckeyes, a 5.5-point favorite against the Longhorns for Friday night in the Cotton Bowl. The total stands at 53.5. And, Joe, to me, the story of this game as we begin our breakdown is the market movement we have seen. Projected hypothetical numbers. If Ohio State won the Rose Bowl and Texas outlasted Arizona State in the Peach Bowl, the Buckeyes would be an ever so slight favorite against the Longhorns. 1.5, a couple of cents on the money line. Ohio State overwhelmingly impressive against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Texas struggled and escaped into overtimes against ASU as a 2-touchdown favorite. So the perceived notion, maybe Texas not as good as we thought. And, this Ohio State team is the team we expected all year to win a national championship. Line opened up for the Cotton Bowl at 4.5 after those 2 results on New Year's Day, and then quickly got bet up to 5 and a hook. Joe, we love the FanDuel Sportsbook. It is the sponsor of this show. But in other spots, this line is even closer to a touchdown. Is the spread too large, or does it feel fitting for Friday night at the Cotton Bowl?
Listen, I had said watching that Ohio State mauling of Oregon that no matter what, the value was going to be on Texas because recency bias was going to creep in. We were going to see Texas, who had to go to overtime there to beat Arizona State, and yet we watched Ohio State make the number 1 team in the country look like they didn't even belong on the same field. So we all knew Ohio State was going to get a ton of public love in this one. So is the value in Texas? Yes. Does that mean they're going to cover this number? Absolutely not. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. I do think the best team is Ohio State. I have a ticket on Ohio State to win everything here. And that includes them beating Texas here, Ben. I don't see Texas going toe-to-toe with how this Ohio State team is rolling right now. And the other problem I have, too, here, or my only concern with Ohio State, is that this team put so much energy and effort to get even with Oregon. That was the game they wanted, Ben, that they looked past Michigan to get because they thought they were going to get it in the Big Ten championship. And then they fell flat there, and then they had to wait for the playoffs in order to exact that revenge, and they did in a big way. There is no history here between Texas and Ohio State. Two very rich historic programs, but not against one another necessarily here. And my only fear is that maybe Ohio State left it all out for Oregon, which will show up early in this game. But I do think that defense and offensively, the best team remaining is Ohio State. And I do think they will eventually get it done here, not just in this game, but in the national championship game.
Joe, I hear that point, exacting revenge, a revenge tour against Oregon in the Rose Bowl, a game we expected to be the Big Ten championship. But Ohio State should never, although it seems as though they might, look over the game, which they have lost 4 consecutive times to Michigan. I do believe once they knew they were drawing Oregon in the Rose Bowl, it was about proving that Ohio State stands atop the mountain in college football. And like you, way back in early October, before even the initial matchup against the Ducks, I bet Ohio State to win a national championship. Didn't even get the best of the number at plus 290, but it is now minus 120. The Buckeyes, the odds-on favorites to win a college football playoff national title. Texas entered the quarterfinal round as that national championship favorite, just so you know. The Longhorns have not been a dog all season long. Neither has Ohio State, and the Buckeyes, of course, have covered impressively so in each of their first 2 games in the college football playoff. They are plus 45, that being Ryan Day's Buckeyes, in their point differential in their first 2 matchups. That's an average margin of victory of 22.5 points per game. Joe, like you, I think this could close Texas as a 6.5-point dog, and there would be value on the Longhorns. But ultimately, I think Ohio State wins the Cotton Bowl and the national championship. More on the early line next.